Hey everybody, welcome back to Readers of the Right. Today we're going to talk about something a little bit more fun, and it's something that I have become very passionate about over the last couple of years, and that is 5 reasons to read Warhammer novels. So, let's dive into it and talk about why these books are some of my absolute favorites, and honestly they're making up about 50% of my reading right now. So, there's a lot that goes into the Warhammer universe, and that's honestly one of the biggest appeals for it is its depth of world building and its immersive lore. There's so much involved, from the different alien races known as Xenos to the different human factions, and even to the weird beings of the warp. It has so many different levels and so many different treatments that come from different genres. For example, you have what are called psykers, which in fantasy would be called wizards. Well, wizards, sorcerers, witches, all of the above. They are beings with special abilities to do a myriad of things. Some of them can see into the warp and help ships navigate that chaotic wasteland. Others can throw lightning. Others can move things with their mind. And so many other things. On top of that, you have a big rift in humanity. Some have embraced creatures of the warp and have begun calling them gods, worshiping them and accepting their focus on excesses of human emotion. And I say human loosely to mean sentient beings. For example, you have the 4 chaos gods. You have Khorne, who is the god of anger and bloodshed. You have Nurgle, who is the god of decay and rot, but also the god of creation and growth. You have Tzeentch, who is the god of change, and Slaanesh, who is the god of excess. This lore goes back for hundreds of thousands of years, to back before humans were even really a thing. And if you go into it, you can dive so deep into the lore that you will be lost trying to understand exactly how these warp beings became a thing and how groups like the Eldar and the Orcs were created to fight against a group called the Necrons and many others, trying to win the first war over the Milky Way galaxy and gain control of it and their right to survive. With all of this going on, humans become the catalyst of the next round of warfare and expansion. And for a long time, humans do that. But as they expand and as they conquer and as they unify the galaxy, civil war erupts and rips it all apart again. And humankind is broken into 2 separate factions. The group called Chaos, that we talked about a little bit before, that worship the Chaos gods sometimes, or at least embrace them and can take on their powers. While you have other humans called the Imperium, not actually the good guys. There are no actual good guys in this entire story. That's a little bit hard to accept, I know. They're often portrayed as the good guys. And frankly, a lot of the characters that come from there are good guys. For example, Dan Abnett's Gaunt's Ghosts. I actually think they are pretty much the good guys. They are average people in a world or in a galaxy that is so far consumed at war that they're average soldiers fighting super soldiers and tanks and giant Gundams and warp monsters and all of these terrible things, and just having to be a squad of a company of average people with just guns and camo cloaks to try and survive is fascinating. If you've ever if you're a fan of the show Band of Brothers or The Pacific, Gaunt's Ghost is for you. It's literally that in space. It is that same basic foundational story of a group of soldiers trying to survive. And it is so good. And the lore I could talk about for days. But because we're already a quarter of the way through this, I'm going to keep going. But if you ever want to ask lore questions or discuss lore, comment below. And like and subscribe, because I will be doing more Warhammer stuff. That's just a given with how obsessed I am. The next, there are epic battles in heroic sagas. So, if you're a fantasy battle person, add guns to it, put it in space, Warhammer. Best way to explain it. There are so many battles. And a lot of them are based around individual people and how they survived those battles. It's fascinating to see how the authors in the Black Library, which is the Warhammer's collection, or is Warhammer's collection run by Games Workshop, who's the company who actually owns the IP, how they can take these epic scale battles, boil them down to a few people, and make them feel so emotional a lot of the time while still telling epic stories. It's something that you typically only see in epic fantasy in books like Lord of the Rings, or the later books in the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe series, or Shanra, or the Powder Mage trilogies, or those types of stories. Books that are just absolutely massive and take a ton of time to tell a story. You see this in space, in Warhammer. It's something that very few science fiction authors could probably actually pull off in their IPs, but it's something that they pull off here because they have that foundation of deep, deep, deep lore. On top of that, you have a lot of heroic sagas. Stories of heroes sent to do insane things to try and save people or defeat the enemy. One of my favorites in Gaunt's Ghosts, I will keep this brief to not have any spoilers, but he and a small team are sent off to try and assassinate a traitor who's turned from the Imperium to Chaos. And to do that, they have to infiltrate a Chaos world without becoming tainted by Chaos. And it's pretty much an epic saga for an average guy. You see this as well with several of the major heroes. You'll see this with some Space Marines. You also see it in some of the Necron books that allow you to actually see that hero's journey that you're used to in fantasy especially, without having all of the hallmarks and staples of fantasy. And it's something I absolutely love. It's the reason I love fantasy, and it's the reason I love Warhammer. It gives me both. And if you love that, you will love Warhammer as well. And if that's something you love, please let me know in the comments. I have recommendations for you. There's several different book series you can start with that are fantastic for deep heroes' journeys. The third is the diverse range of stories you can get. Warhammer is such a broad and diverse universe that you don't just have the typical epic fantasy where there's a bunch of space battles and there's a ground battle and that's about it. You have spy novels, you have heists, you have almost Western style novels, you have major battles, of course, you have very interpersonal politics. There's several novels that take place on Terra and the Imperium, and you get to watch all of the politics and maneuvering done on Terra by the High Lords and the Custodies, who are the guardians of the Emperor, and the other different factions. You also get to see some, trying to think of the best word for this, some more religion-heavy stories where you get stories of faith and devotion. While they don't directly relate to actual faith and religion, here it's fun to see characters actually experiencing that as well. And you get so many other stories and so many other different situations. There are even a few romances that I've seen. Not big ones, they're not too common. But they do exist. And it's fascinating to see the level of diversity that can be held in this absolutely insane universe. The next thing that is really, really cool about the Warhammer universe is because it's so broad and because they've created the factions they have, they get to explore a lot of moral and philosophical questions directly while sharing cool stories. One of the big ones that I've seen a lot in books that I'm reading right now is how far is too far when embracing technology. You see this with the Adeptus Mechanicum, which is the religion that's based around technology, but they're also the engineers, the inventors, and the creators of technology in the Imperium. And a lot of characters, when dealing with them, will often see the little bits of humanity that's left. A lot of them have embraced technology to a point where there's almost nothing human left. They are barely short of being a robot. And the disconcerting nature of that is absolutely fascinating. There's also times when the heroes of the story are put in a position where they lose. And the only way that they can save the rest of the galaxy from a problem, whether it be, for lack of a better word, a demonic incursion, or a group called the Tyranids who devour everything, is to exterminate a planet. And sometimes they weren't able to evacuate all of the civilians, but they have to do it now or it'll be too late. So they're forced to make those life and death choices on a massive scale that I hope no human will ever have to make. But addressing that question is something that's extremely important. Isaac Asimov talked about this a lot with robotics and artificial intelligence. He used to push those boundaries for the exact intent of challenging them before we have to challenge it in reality. If we challenge it in novels, we can formulate our beliefs on it before we're faced with that question. We're able to find the line where sentience and robotics should stop. And humankind can accept that and embrace it before we actually hit the point where we have to make that decision. And it's something that Warhammer has become a huge influence on, especially with the military aspects of it and the political aspects of it. You see people at their worst so that you never have to get there. And hopefully you never have to make those decisions. It's something that I find fascinating and is one of my absolute favorite parts of Warhammer and just books in general, is that boundary pushing and the philosophical questions of what is okay and what isn't. One of the big ones that's coming up, especially in some of the newer Warhammer novels, is relationships with aliens. What is okay, what isn't, which ones are okay to be friends with, which ones aren't, how far is too far, how far is not far enough, what things are okay, what things aren't. I would love to go into more detail, but most of the ones I just referenced are spoilers, so you'll have to read it and find out. And all of these questions are regularly addressed. Very rarely will you have a Warhammer novel where at least one of these points isn't questioned, isn't brought up or addressed. It may be subtle, but it will come up somewhere. And it is absolutely fascinating to see the effects that it can have on me as a reader and as a community. On top of that, the community is amazing because Warhammer is not just books. Warhammer, the books are a gateway and an asset to a much larger community, a community that has war games and has video games and has soon to be a TV show run by Henry Cavill on Amazon. And this community is growing quickly. And reading the novels is a great way to start, to see if it's a community you'll enjoy. I absolutely love it. I'm glad my friend and coworker actually helped me discover this a few years ago, because it's influenced my writing, it's influenced me, and it's given me a community that I didn't know I didn't have. And it's also given me a hobby that's not writing, which allows me to decompress and focus on something else for a little while, especially when I have writer's block or anything like that. And I absolutely recommend it. It's a fantastic community, usually very welcoming, and it's a hobby and a game that you can grow with long term. It doesn't get boring quickly. So there's a lot of other reasons as well, but those are the big 5 reasons why I recommend getting into Warhammer and starting to read it. If you have any questions about where to start, I will link my other video that gives some suggestions. And just check it out. Try it out. If you have an Audible credit, there's several different places to start. I always recommend The Founding by Dan Abnett. It is a fantastic novel, and it is a great introduction. There's several different points you'll find online that point you in those directions to where the best places to start are. There are several, and none of them are wrong. Whatever interests you is a great place to start. So check those books out and let me know what you think. If you have any favorites, or if you have another community that's like this as well. I'm also a big fan of things like Star Wars as well and Star Trek. But if you have other communities like this, I'm always looking for them. I love to learn all of the amazing stories behind a lot of these communities and movies and games and things like that. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us in the comments below to discuss a lot of these cool things. And we'll see you next time.